Henry Ford was one of the first American industrialists. Ford is best known for his revolutionary achievements in the automobile industry. His love for automobiles started at a very young age of 16. But before all that, he was just another small-town farmer. Henry Ford's family farm, Ford Farms, was located near Dearborn, Michigan. Henry was born on the farm on June 20th, 1863. Henry Ford was just like every other child in his town and went to this local school district. In 1880, Ford became a machinist apprentice in Detroit, where he learned the basics of machinery. Only 2 years later, Ford became a certified machinist, but decided to move back to the farm. For 11 years, Henry Ford was a mechanical engineer and later chief of engineers with Edison Illuminating Company. During his years working for Edison Illuminating Company, Ford fell in love with a young lady named Clara Bryant. After they got married in 1891, he left the farm in Michigan and moved to Detroit to be closer to work. After moving to Detroit, Ford's life prospered. In 1893, Henry's wife gave birth to a baby girl, Edson. His family and friends did not support his dreams of building cars and suggested that he get a more stable job. Many believed they were simply toys and he would never replace the horse-drawn carriage, but he would prove them wrong. June 4th, 1896, Henry finished his first ever car, which was known as the quadricycle. He was so excited to take out his new invention out for a ride. He took it for a ride around the block as many stared. The quadricycle was only big enough for one person. Even though his wife wanted to ride with him, she was very excited for him and stood and watched him drive off. Soon after his first ride, he decided to make the seat bigger for his whole family to ride. And the first place they went to was Ford Farms. Finally, his work was taken seriously. Henry Ford formed a motor company called Ford Motors in 1903. During his first year of owning his company, the first Model A appeared on the market in Detroit. This would lead to many public events and even a lawsuit with Allen over Selden patent, which Henry eventually won. Then, in 1908, Henry Ford made an extremely famous Model T. By 1912, Ford had many new ideas on ways he could make the process of making cars faster. In 1913, Ford began using an assembly line idea. And this was a great development of the American industry and was a rising of the American standard of living. During the year 1914, the assembly line required workers to work longer and harder because the demand for the cars increased. So Ford had to increase the workers' pay from what normal manual laborers were making to $50 to $5. Along with the huge increase in input, Ford made it possible with new high-tech methods. They went from a $30 million company in 1914 to a $60 million company in 1960. In 1924, Henry discontinued the Model T for a newer, updated version. The company ended up selling almost 15 million cars that year. But in the next few years, Ford's leadership of the American car dropped with his trouble of introducing a new car every year, which had now become a more popular thing to do in the car business. Ford Motor Company over the years didn't just continue to sell in Detroit, but all over the world. Ford was forced to retire from active work of his enterprise in 1945. He died 2 years later on April 7, 1947, of a stroke. Most of Ford's fortune, estimated to have been $500 to $700 million, went to the Ford Motor Company and started a nonprofit organization called the Ford Foundation. Ta-da!